They thought humans were harmless until the smiles stopped, and the fleet moved in silence. My name is Velk, Senior Diplomatic Observer of the Grathian Collective, and I am going to tell you something that no official report, no galactic archive, and absolutely no coalition press release will ever admit out loud. We were idiots. Not the casual kind of idiots either. Not the oops we made a small miscalculation kind. No. We were the spectacular gold medal Hall of Fame variety of idiots. The kind that future civilizations will study in classrooms while shaking whatever heads they happen to have, whispering to each other. Can you believe they actually did that? Yes, we did that. Now let me give you some context, because context matters, especially when you are about to describe the single most catastrophic misreading of a species in recorded galactic history. The Galactic Coalition had been operating for about 600 years by the time humanity showed up. 600 years of diplomacy, trade agreements, species classifications, and a very comfortable assumption that we, the older civilizations, knew everything worth knowing about how intelligent life behaved. We had a whole system, a ranking system. Species were evaluated on aggression levels, biological durability, psychological resilience, and what our scientists called threat potential. It was a very organized system, very official, very stamped and approved and filed in triplicate. Humanity scored low, embarrassingly low, almost insultingly low. And honestly, looking back, I understand exactly why. The first human ambassador to address the coalition was a woman named Tessa Brow. She walked into the Grand Chamber of Velthara, surrounded by 17 alien species, each one older and more powerful than her entire civilization, and she smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a diplomatic smile. A genuine, warm, oh this is wonderful kind of smile, the way a person smiles when they walk into a bakery and smell fresh bread. She laughed at Chancellor Orvan's greeting, because he mispronounced the human title, and she found it genuinely funny. She shook hands, or attempted to, with Ambassador Krax of the Ferundi, who had no hands, only tentacles, and she adapted instantly without a single moment of hesitation and said, "Oh, that works too." The entire chamber was watching her. And I remember turning to my colleague, a stout little Grathian named Porvik, and whispering, "She seems pleasant." Porvik snorted. "She seems harmless." And that right there was the beginning of the end. Not for humanity, for us. Because the coalition heard pleasant and harmless and collectively decided that humanity was easy, soft, a species that could be nudged, pressured, and quietly pushed around while the bigger players divided up the more valuable trade routes and resource sectors, so they tested humanity. Small things at first. A trade agreement that was subtly tilted against human interests, a border marker moved 2 sectors inside human-claimed space, a coalition vote where every human proposal was cheerfully acknowledged and then quietly buried, and Tessa Brow kept smiling. She renegotiated the trade agreement with such pleasant firmness that the opposing delegates walked away confused about how they had agreed to worse terms than they started with. She filed a formal complaint about the border marker, in writing, very politely, and attached 47 pages of legal precedent. The coalition laughed. Not meanly, not openly, just among themselves, in the corridors and the lounges and the private channels. "They write strongly worded letters," Orvan joked once. "Oh, Chancellor, you sweet catastrophically wrong fool. Now we arrive at the part of this story where I must introduce the Kreth Empire. If the coalition was arrogant, the Kreth were arrogant with decorations on top. They were large, they were militarized, and they had a long history of sending messages to species they considered beneath them. Not full wars, nothing so formal, just strikes, demonstrations, a reminder of where power actually lived in this galaxy. They had done it before, twice. Both times the targeted species had backed down immediately, and the coalition had written a very stern statement, and everyone had moved on. So when the Kreth set their eyes on Ardent Station, a human civilian colony of roughly 40,000 people sitting on the edge of contested space, they were not expecting anything new. They were expecting the usual script. They attacked on a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because the human representative at the coalition chambers told us afterward, very quietly, that Tuesdays were apparently already a difficult day for humans, and the Kreth had managed to make it worse. There was no humor in her voice when she said it. They hit the colony hard. They broadcast the footage. Every species in the coalition received it simultaneously, a very deliberate move, a performance of power designed to remind everyone who held the upper hand. They killed civilians. They destroyed the station's central hub. They transmitted one line of communication to Earth, Know your place. And then they waited. The coalition waited. I waited. Everyone was waiting for the crying, for the emergency addresses, for the impassioned speeches at the Grand Chamber, for Tessa Brow to walk in, smile gone, eyes wet, voice shaking, begging for justice. What we got was silence. Total, absolute, unbroken silence. For 6 hours, Earth said nothing. No statement, no response to the Kreth transmission, no communication to the coalition. Tessa Brow did not appear. No human diplomat appeared. Every channel to Earth went quiet in a way that felt less like grief and more like a door being shut, very calmly, from the inside. It was Porvik who first said what I was thinking. He leaned over to me, and his voice was considerably smaller than usual, and he said, "Velk, why aren't they saying anything?" I did not have a good answer. I noticed it first. I want credit for that, officially. For the record, I noticed it first. 3 days after Ardent Station, human cargo vessels stopped moving along their usual routes, not because they were grounded. They just changed course, all of them, simultaneously. As if every human pilot in the galaxy received the same instruction at the same moment and simply adjusted without question. Human delegates at the coalition stopped attending optional sessions. They still came to mandatory proceedings. They sat down. They were polite, but the warmth was gone. Tessa Brow still had the shape of a smile on her face, but it no longer reached anything further up. Human communication to coalition partners became short, factual, and precise. No pleasantries, no extra words. Just information, delivered cleanly, like someone who had stopped bothering to perform for an audience they no longer respected. And the human fleets, which the coalition military assessment had described as modest and largely defensive, began moving quietly. No announcements, no declarations, no dramatic speeches. They just moved. I filed a report. I flagged it to Chancellor Orvan personally. I stood in his office and told him directly, "Something is happening. Something has changed. We need to pay attention." Orvan looked at my report, then looked at me, and then did the thing I will regret watching for the rest of my life. He laughed. "Velk," he said, patting me on one of my upper shoulders. "They are civilians playing at being soldiers. Their entire fleet wouldn't scratch the Kreth's forward defense line. Stop worrying." I went back to my office. I started worrying significantly more. Commander Dara Voss, I want you to remember that name, because the galaxy certainly did after that week. She did not make a speech. She sent one communication to the Kreth Empire, time to arrive exactly 40 minutes before her fleet did. 40 minutes, because as a human analyst later explained to a stunned coalition assembly, that was enough time for them to understand what was coming but not enough time to fully prepare. That was intentional. Every part of it was intentional. The human fleet that arrived at the Kreth home system was not modest. It was not largely defensive. It was precise, coordinated, and operating with a strategic clarity that made our best military analysts go very quiet and start pulling up old data to figure out where they had gone wrong. They had not gone wrong. They had simply never imagined that humanity was paying this much attention. Because that was the thing about humans that we missed entirely. They were quiet about what they knew. They watched. They documented. They filed things away in their minds and their databases and their training programs, and they prepared for scenarios they never told anyone else they were preparing for. The Kreth defense system, which had shrugged off 2 other species' attempts at retaliation in the past century, began falling apart within the first hour. Not because humanity had more firepower, because humanity had studied every single engagement the Kreth had ever fought, identified the exact patterns of their defense response and built a counter to each one before the battle even started. I was watching the live feeds in the coalition monitoring room. I heard Ambassador Krax of the Ferundi say, very softly, "Oh no." I heard 3 other delegates go completely silent. I personally gripped the edge of my console and made a noise that Grathian historians will hopefully never recover audio of. Dara Voss did not obliterate the Kreth. That is an important detail. Humanity did not wipe them out, did not level their cities, did not do any of the things that the Kreth had done to Ardent Station. They dismantled the military infrastructure. They removed the capacity for aggression. They left the civilian population entirely untouched. Then Commander Voss sent a second communication. It said, "Message received, response delivered, do not test us again." That was it. No performance, no speech, no declaration of dominance. Just a fact, stated plainly, By a species that had apparently been done talking some time ago? The silence in the coalition chamber the next morning was a different kind of silence than what Earth had given us. Ours was stunned, theirs had been purposeful. Every species spent approximately 48 hours quietly reviewing their own history of interactions with humanity and feeling an increasing amount of what I believe humans call a cold sweat. The coalition issued a formal statement condemning the Kreth attack on Ardent Station, which they absolutely should have issued immediately and had not, and extended an official apology to the human delegation. Tessa Brow accepted it. She was smiling again. That smile, I now understood, had never indicated softness. It had indicated patience. It had indicated a species so confident in what they were capable of that they could afford to be warm and pleasant and laughing right up until the moment they were not. We had looked at that smile and seen harmlessness. What it actually was restraint. Porvik found me afterward, standing in the corridor outside the chamber, staring at nothing in particular. You warned them, he said. I did, I said. Orvin isn't laughing anymore. No, I said. He is not. There was a pause, a long one. Were they always like this? Porvik asked. I thought about Tessa Brow laughing at the mispronounced title. I thought about her adapting to Krax's tentacles without missing a beat. I thought about 47 pages of legal precedent filed politely, the cargo ships shifting course in silence, the fleet that moved without a single announcement. Yes, I said. We just never asked the right question. What was the right question? I looked at him. Not, are they dangerous? The right question was, what does it take for them to stop smiling? Porvik was quiet for a moment. And now we know, he said. And now we know, I agreed. Here is what I will tell any species that has not yet encountered humanity, free of charge, no diplomatic fees attached. They will be warm. They will be funny. They will laugh at things, including themselves, which no species with genuine arrogance ever does. They will negotiate patiently. They will file complaints politely. They will give you every opportunity in the known universe to simply behave. And if you decide, despite all of that, to cross the line they have drawn quietly in their own hearts long before you ever noticed it was there, well, you will not be laughing either.